The reading is from Joshua chapter 2, Rahab and the spies. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. "Go, look over the land," he said, "especially Jericho." So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab: "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them." But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, "I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts sank, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death." "Our lives for your lives," the men assured her. "If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land." So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. She said to them, "Go to the hills so that the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there for 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." Now the men had said to her, "This oath you made us swear will not be binding on us unless, when we enter the land, you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you have brought your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family into your house. If any of them go outside your house into the street, their blood will be on their own heads. We will not be responsible. As for those who are in the house with you, their blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on them. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear." "Agreed," she replied. "Let it be as you say." So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days, until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the 2 men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua son of Nun and told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us."
Let's pray. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the thoughts of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Well, as Marcy said, we're beginning a new series this morning in Heroes of the Faith, based on that list of people that we find in Hebrews 11 as examples of faithfulness. And I'm quite blessed, really, in that I'm going first, so I get to choose first. A huge thank you to David, who was going to choose the same one as hero as me, but has very kindly decided to choose someone else. I hope I do our mutual hero justice this morning, David. My hero of the faith is Rahab, who we've just heard about there. I wonder, when you hear the word hero, what kind of mental pictures you have. For me, I tend to think of superheroes, and being of a certain age, when I think of superhero, I tend to think of Superman. Now, I'm not old enough to remember Superman from the TV series of the 1950s. Some of you might be. I'm not going to pass judgment on that, really. That would be dangerous to do, I think. But rather the films of the 1970s with Christopher Reeves as Superman. And you might remember that Superman had a motto. Superman's motto was that he was to fight for truth, for justice, and for the American way. To fight for truth, justice, and the American way. How our friends in the US could do with Superman right now. But if we associate heroism with that kind of vision of moral propriety, of being an honest, upstanding citizen, having a pronounced sense of patriotism, I think Rahab would fall very short if we gave her the Superman test. It wouldn't make any sense to have her as a hero on that basis. It certainly wouldn't make any sense to the Israelites of her time, because Rahab is an outsider, she's a Canaanite, she's a woman, and she's a prostitute. And this story is one of those places in the Bible, and there are quite a lot of them, I think, actually, where if you were writing it to show God's people in their best light, you really wouldn't write it in this way. The story doesn't even start well, really, does it? Because the two spies that are sent into Canaan ahead of the conquering forces, when they arrive between enemy lines, instead of gathering information by blending in with local communities, they head straight for the house of a prostitute. Israel's conquering of Canaan is initiated by a female enemy prostitute. So the first thing to say about Rahab, my hero of the faith, is that we would say that she is flawed. She is flawed. You might, like me, those of us of a certain age, I suspect, have grown up hearing the phrase, "She's no better than she ought to be." You hear that phrase? Yeah. She's no better than she ought to be. In my family, that referred to a woman, and it was always a woman, I'm sad to say, whose moral standards were not allegedly as high as my grandma's were. My grandma would sit and tut at people and, well, she's no better than she ought to be. Strange phrase, isn't it, really? If we unpack it, I think it means, literally, that she did not exceed the ethical standard that circumstances required. She was only as virtuous as she was forced to be, if you like. And we might say that Rahab was only as virtuous as she was forced to be. And the probability then, as is often the case now, is that she was forced to be a prostitute, to sell herself for money, not out of choice, but out of financial necessity. Being the victim of a male-dominated economic system where women had no opportunities to earn a living, she had little choice but to sell the one thing that was of value that she owned, and that was herself. She lived as an outcast. We're told her house was on the very edge of the city walls, and it was here that she plied her trade. And it's fascinating, I think, that when Rahab is commended for her faith in the New Testament, on both occasions she is referred to as a prostitute. The Message rather colourfully puts it, names her the Jericho harlot. We won't use that phrase this morning, but... And yet James writes, a little patronisingly, I think, to be honest, that even she was considered righteousness for her faithful actions. Well, if we're being honest, her actions don't really fit neatly into a heroic narrative either, because by them she is both a liar and a traitor. Moral propriety, being an honest, upright citizen, having a pronounced sense of patriotism, 0 out of 3 for Rahab, I'm afraid. So here is a woman who spectacularly fails the Superman hero test, because for a hero she is deeply flawed. Yet this flawed woman was also faithful. Not to her king and country, not always, if we're being honest, to telling the truth, but to someone higher. Now, I think we need to be clear that in the narrative, Rahab does have some options. She may well have received praise and even a reward for handing over these two enemies to the king's forces. She could have used her charms to delay them in their mission. She could have asked for some money from the Israelites. We surmise she didn't have a lot of that, really. She could have asked them to reward her financially for how she saved and helped them. But she doesn't do any of those things. Because it seems clear to her that these two men under her roof don't simply represent a foreign army carrying all ahead of it by military prowess alone. Something greater is happening. These men are part of an army conquering the land. They have already brought down Sihon and Ogeth, two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, we're told. And these are from the same people, she knows, who walked out of Egypt across the dried up bed of the Red Sea. These things tell her that God, the God that they worship, must be powerful. Hence, when she sent the king's messengers off on a wild goose chase, she declares to them, "The Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below." And here she's echoing the words of Deuteronomy 4, verse 39. The Lord is God in heaven above and on the earth below. There is no other. And here then I think we see what's uppermost in Rahab's heart. This woman, who I think we can safely surmise has not been shown much kindness in her life thus far, wants the favour and kindness of the God of Israel and the mercy of his people. And so she tries to make a bargain with them. Now she knows that their destruction of Sihon and Og involved not only the defeat of two kings, but also widespread civilian casualties and captures. We have the battle code for that encounter in Deuteronomy. It seems harsh to us today. When the Lord your God delivers a city into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it. As for the women, the children, the livestock, and everything in the city, you may take these as plunder for yourself. And you may use the plunder the Lord your God gives you from your enemies. So in the light of this, Rahab seeks mercy for her family as she has shown mercy to the two spies. The one thing we can say about heroes is that heroes are brave. And we mustn't downplay Rahab's bravery here. Not only is she putting herself at enormous risk by lying to her own country's soldiers and misdirecting them, but as far as we know, she's alone in the house with the two spies. That does not put her in a strong bargaining position. These men could easily have overpowered her at any point and escaped anyway. The faith that she is commended for is bravely trusting that the God that they worship will hold them back from harming her and show kindness to her through them, who she herself has been kind to. The Old Testament is quite frustrating in lots of ways. It's full of stories of women whose names we don't know, names we'd like to know. Often important characters known only by their relationship to men. Lot's wife, Pharaoh's daughter, Micah's mother, to name but three. What I love about this story is that we have no idea about the names of the men sent to spy by the Israelites. We have no idea of the male messengers who came from the king of Jericho. We will never now know them. But this poor Canaanite woman, who existed by selling her body by the walls of the city, we know her name was Rahab. And we know too that this faithful woman was also family. Later on in Joshua chapter 6, we know the outcome of the story. We're told in verse 25 that Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho. And then it says, with wonderful understatement, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. That really is somewhat of an understatement. As one commentator puts it, through her actions, Rahab acted as the midwife to the embryonic Israel, enabling it to come into full existence through the conquering of Canaan and the entry into the promised land. But even more than this, the reason that Rahab deserves to be remembered as one of the heroes of the faith is because, as well as being twice commended for her faith as a prostitute in the New Testament, she is named in Matthew's Gospel for something even more significant. This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, meaning that Jesus sits in King David's line. The same King David, whose great-great-great-grandmother was Rahab, the poor Canaanite woman who existed by selling her body by the walls of the city of Jericho. It's perhaps no coincidence that Jesus was at home among tax collectors and prostitutes and those regarded as the lowest in society. For me, I have to say that the presence of this flawed, faithful woman in the genealogy of Jesus is one of the most wonderful verses in the Bible, because her presence there speaks to me of mine and yours too. Rahab is told to display a scarlet cord from the window that she lowered the spies down from, presumably so that her house was not targeted during the ransacking of the city that would follow an Israelite victory. And this detail has been the subject of much interpretation over the centuries. Some commentators have likened it to the blood painted on the door frames by Israelites to protect them from the destructive plague that God sent to strike Egypt with in Exodus 12. Others have made a link with the blood of Christ. Personally speaking, I don't think we can say with any conviction really that either of these meanings are intended by the author, perhaps. But I do think that without trying to claim any textual authority for it, we might find the symbol of the scarlet cord a helpful reminder of our continuity with Rahab. The faith that she is commended for is one which believes in the sovereignty and mercy of God, and which she acts on bravely and at great risk, in doing so transforming both her own situation and indeed the history of Israel. And Paul reminds us in that letter to the Ephesians, that the family which Rahab is part of, we are also invited into by the glorious grace offered to us, adopted as his children through Jesus Christ. The scarlet cord perhaps can be a reminder to us that we too are part of that line, part of that family, and that for us This is thanks to Jesus' death on the cross. That same family that contains Rahab now contains me and you and all who would follow Jesus Christ as their Lord and Saviour. We stand on the shoulder of giants, and Rahab is among them. As she went before Jesus, we now come afterwards. If it helps, if you're someone who finds pictures helpful, if Rahab is at one end of that scarlet cord, we are those at the other end, and it will extend beyond us into eternity. I find that incredibly moving. Incredibly moving. But then I guess the reason for that is because, like Rahab, there are plenty of times in my life, I know, when I've been no better than I ought to be. When I did not exceed the ethical standard that circumstances required. When I was only as virtuous as I was forced to be. And yet Paul writes that God chose us in Christ to be holy and blameless before him, including me, and including you, and including all of us. And the life of Rahab is a clear indication that God can use anyone who is willing. Our past is not a barrier to God using us. Rahab, my hero, found herself in a particular situation and time and had a choice to make about what role she would inhabit. There were other ways she could have protected her own self-interest, but she chose to inhabit the role of one who trusted her future on the mercy of the Lord who is God in heaven, above and on earth below. And in adopting us into his family, God calls us to live holy and blameless lives before him. A calling, I think, to inhabit the role of God's children, trusting our future, as Rahab did, on his mercy. Heroes are those who inspire us, but the best heroes are the ones who give us something to emulate. And our calling, flawed as we are, like Rahab, is to be as faithful as she was, by the grace of her God and ours. Amen.